Hi everyone, my name's Olivia Vlodek. I'm going to be doing a video on Nick Cage. To begin to understand the art of Nick Cave, his background and childhood has to be understood first. Nick Cave was born in Fulton, Missouri on February 4th, 1959. This artist is an African-American fabric sculptor and also does performance art and dance. Nick is known mostly for his wearable work sculptures. Something interesting to know about this artist is that he first started looking into fiber arts while studying in the Kansas City Art Institute in 1982. His work is interesting because it creates a connection between fashion, dance, and art. He spent a lot of his time in theaters all over New York and actually put some of his work in department stores such as Macy's as a fashion designer. Nick creates some interesting art throughout his career that is a reflection of his childhood and artist experiences growing up. Nick's background explains why he does the type of work he does and how he shows his creativity. Next, we'll go on to what materials he uses in his artwork primarily. The materials is where it gets interesting for this artist because he uses his materials very complexly to form his art. For example, Nick uses random materials such as postcards, pins, and magnets to form what he calls sound suits. Before going into what these art pieces are, since the artist was considered a minority throughout his artist and educational part of life, he didn't exactly fit in with his peers. Instead of feeling like an outcast or trying to accept it, he did the complete opposite and created these sound suits, which are, in other words, on-hand materials put together in sculptural forms based on body styles, essentially covering the body in a thick layer or camouflaging, basically creating a sort of second skin. His purpose for this was by creating this thick layer of art over the body, it would conceal race, gender, and class, or any other characterizable features, making everyone equal. And by doing this, the artist makes the audience view the art pieces on the models without judgment. This is important to him because he wants the viewer to focus solely on the art and nothing else. With the materials he uses, he makes his art look similar to mascots. For example, a piece of art that really shows this aspect of Nick is the Sound Suit No. 2 made in 2013. This piece uses materials such as dye and fake fur to make the sound suit have a mascot-like feel. Next, we'll talk about the identifying qualities of the artist's style. Furthermore, Nick Cave's art is very easy to identify as he uses very diverse materials and different kinds of methods for his work. One great example of being able to identify his work is the materials he uses, since he uses totally random items of a variety of similar colors to morph them together into art. Again, his artwork can be clearly identified in sound suits, which are his most popular piece of art. One great piece of his artwork was called the Sound Suit 1. He created this piece in 2006, and it was one of the most widely known and very popular pieces of art, still to this day. The materials he used in this were wood, wool, dryer lint, and paint, very basic materials. This artwork shows that he values not only creativity but experimentation based on not just the materials he uses but the way it is designed to fit a human being and essentially mask all characterizable features. His drive for this was to get his audience to not focus on the person wearing the suit but the art itself. This is a way that his art can be identified because he doesn't necessarily care about the model or beauty. This art is consistent with time and location because we live in an era where most people are concerned about the look and actions of other individuals other than what really matters. And this artist really does a great job at bypassing that and really focusing on the art itself rather than unimportant details. The key features of his art really is the creativity because each piece is handcrafted with a different material, color scheme, and metaphor behind the work. Although he is most widely known for his sound suits, he also made other kinds of art that are still very popular now. For example, as a designer, Nick also designed clothing. For example, the Hustle trench coat by this artist was actually created very recently in 2017. This is a so-called mixed media coat that he has, which is a little different from his other pieces in the sense that it is designed more meticulously and thoroughly. By this, I mean that he didn't use random materials. Instead, he used chains and costume jewelry to make this trench coat different from other designers and essentially made it look more desirable. Because he is such a well-known, multi-talented designer, his clothing usually goes for around $60,000 a piece. Now moving on to what critics say about Cave's art. According to a 2006 article by Jack Shainman in the New York Times, critics classify the artist's work as fashion, body art, and sculpture. According to the New York Times, Nick Cave's art stood out in museums for its sheer decorative vehemence. Critics also state that they appreciate Cave's sense of culture and thought that he incorporates into mostly all of his costumes. A lot of people say that his art is diverse and very different than most designers. This is probably because of his ethnic background and his background from when he was younger, leading up to his work now. They speak of him in a sense that even though his work is different and uses sometimes random materials, it comes together in the end to be a very well-presentable piece of art. Another critic that speaks about Nick Cave's work is Hampton Stevens, in a 2013 article in The Atlantic magazine. This critic explains Cave's work as lots of colors and sparkles and not lighthearted whatsoever. One critic even explains his work as vulgar but beautiful. The critics even added how, even though he uses sometimes cheap fabrics, he forms those materials into something that can be useful and beautiful. Many critics in this article believe that Nick's obsessive placement of every piece of material makes the observers appreciate his work more, knowing there was lots of time and effort put into what they are looking at. According to Hampton Stevens in the article in The Atlantic magazine, he quotes, "I've come to realize that Nick does creativity different than anyone." This quote is a great example of stressing the quality of the artist's works because his perception of art is so different that he can procreate something no other artist can match. Overall, the artist's critiquers had no controversy on his work, and the critics' opinions were mostly positive. I think this is because Nick, having come from minority and different background, gave him bigger inspiration than other artists and produced art that could not possibly have a bad opinion based on all that he's been through his childhood. In conclusion, this artist is a very talented and very different in the way that he creates his work. Coming from a different background than your peers and being a minority can often discourage most people, but for Nick, it motivated him instead. This shows that because Nick was a strong artist, his art will prove strong and meaningful. I believe that Nick's art was also helpful in reaching out to other minorities in the sense that no matter what your background is, you can accomplish anything you set your mind to. This is a great example he sets for his audience and even the outsiders. Even if not all of Nick's work is considered beautiful, his art meaning will always be because of the story behind it, which makes him one of the most inspiring artists today. All in all, the critics said good and accurate things about this artist. His art can clearly be identified, and the materials he uses are unique to him only. Lastly, the video I present is a clip from the video Nick Cave Brings Art Sculpture to Life with Sound Suits by PBS NewsHour. This video explains the artist's work and the thought process behind it.
Part sculpture, part costume, reflecting his desire to meld art, dance, and fashion.
We tend to want to sort of categorize or put something in its place in order for it to make sense. Here, I don't think that my work can really be put into any particular category. So you're forced to sort of ask yourself the question, what is it? What am I encountering at this very moment?